Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kalfa. Let's talk about some wolves. Here with joining Stephen and myself today, the first person, I said this before we started, to ever contact me on Twitter and asked to be on the podcast, Brett Ochs. He's coming to us from Boulder, Colorado. He's a nature lover, and really we want to get into this dynamic of hunters or former hunters who are on the side of wolves and get this unique perspective. So Brett, thanks so much for reaching out and just for wanting to be here and share this perspective with us. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for accepting my tweet and
our pleasure,
and getting us allowing me to come on here. I really appreciate this opportunity and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, Stephen's been waiting for something like this for a while, as have I. So this is great. So just give us a background on yourself. Where do you come from? How did you get involved in nature? Just give everybody a capsule of you in a nutshell.
It started young as a family. I'm the youngest of three kids. And I'm not sure where my parents got the love of nature, but we almost every weekend through summers that I could ever remember, we were usually camping or going, by a river or something like that. And then we'd take the standard 2-week vacation that my father would get and, take a trip somewhere. And that would be Canada or Montana or, mostly anywhere west. So just was outside a ton. And then kind of moving forward on our subject matter, my father, hunted forever. I guess I never really asked him how he got started. He passed away about 20 years ago, but always as a young kid, always wanted to go with him. It sounded like so much fun, like the guys get to hang out. And finally, I do believe we were 13 or 14, he took me. So it was my dad, two of his friends, my brother, and myself. And, at that time in my life, I just wanted to go spend time. I guess I'll say spend time with the guys. Mm-hmm. And then, over those years found just how my father kind of hunted and what happened when he actually, killed. Usually we went mule deer hunting at that point. So it was just, I found it fascinating. So
awesome.
That's kind of a broad, really quick background of how I kind of got there. So
that's awesome. And that was when you were growing up, that was backcountry camping or car camping, or how serious were your parents about, getting in the outdoors?
It was car camping, trailer. Yeah. We started out with all of us in a standard cab pickup and a shell, and the three of us were in the back, no seat belts, all that good stuff. Just shoving this all into, I think it was a 20-foot trailer.
Wow.
So, yeah, I don't know how they did it.
Wow.
I'm not a parent, but I don't know how they did it with all of us. But I guess that's nature. You wake up and go play, see it dark.
And what type of stuff was your dad hunting? Did you guys eat a lot of wild game or?
Yeah, usually we were hunting mule deer, and early we did some pronghorn too. I don't know why he didn't really go after elk, but it was just mostly mule deer.
Yeah. And so you guys, and you were you ate everything that you killed.
Yeah.
That was the thing you guys, yeah. Okay. So you guys were the, sustainable hunting in that way. So where were you mostly hunting? Were you out west? Were you in Colorado? That's where you're born and raised, and that's where you are? Or where were you guys doing
real
that?
quick,
Okay.
I'm going to add on to what you were just saying about sustainable. So not only did we eat everything that after we got done, we, as a brother, my dad and his friends and brother, myself also processed it in the garage. So cut it up, packaged it and all that. So really had an idea of where that steak or hamburger or whatever it came from. So
yeah. And I'm interested and curious about you being a young hunter, as in a broad sense, in its purest form. I'm a believer in sustainably and ethically harvesting food, including meat, from the landscape.
Right.
And aware of its advantages to conservation even. And of course, there are fringe group activities that I could personally do without and are tarnishing the core concept. But I think this is a point that's often overlooked and missed, is that there are an incredible amount of resources being allocated to wildlife and to habitat restoration and to people directly via hunter tax dollars and hunter resourced projects and initiatives. And it is unique in that way in terms of recreational activities, because most recreational activities do not redistribute a tax back into initiatives to help wildlife or landscapes. So my question is, as a young hunter, were you made aware by your father or other people, or did you become aware at a young age of this sort of complex, larger picture, entire scope of the relationship between our society and the hunting tradition?
No, I really had no idea. I mean, I didn't know. I knew a little bit about nature. The other thing, most Sundays we watch, I'll date myself a little bit here, Mutual of Omaha and, Wild Kingdom and nature, that kind of thing. But no, I don't ever remember being, I'll say, quote unquote, politically driven to do it. Mostly that's, right. That's what my father did. And that's where I got it from. I just, it was like, that's just the way everybody does. Right. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's probably like the usual way. It's just passed down from father to son or daughter, you know, but it's so interesting how this point gets lost a lot of times. I think it's an important thing that a lot of people just don't know.
I agree. And John, going back to your question, I always hunted in Colorado. I haven't hunted in any other state. It's a hand down, I guess as I grew older, I had a deeper appreciation of, like I said, having that hamburger. It's not just a hamburger. We packed it out, we, processed it, and, it's like, and, I'll say, it was free range, and, there's no human quote unquote tied to it. And it just tasted so much better. And that dramatically changed when I did backcountry hunting versus, my father had known somebody up by Craig, Colorado, in the northwest corner. So I got very, very spoiled of hunting on private land. And then when that went away, when that person ended up selling his ranch, I had to do public land hunting, and that changes the game. So,
yeah, I imagine. Yeah, you're in a larger setting, especially in Colorado. I'm sure even in the backwoods there's just so much nature and wildlife that you can run into when you're backcountry hunting. Was it the same situation? You're hunting mule deer, you're hunting pronghorn. Were you hunting elk at any point in time as you got older, or did you stick with mule deer, much like your father?
I did for a while. I did all three. I did pronghorn, mule deer, and elk. And then, I'll say I just didn't take the time, and pronghorn dropped off kind of my window. And then I did mule deer and elk. And then we had in Colorado, a fairly big mule deer crash, a little bit with the start of chronic wasting disease, and then the continued rise of elk in the state. So then from that point, I mostly went elk. I'll say bigger numbers, and at that particular time where I was hunting, there was I'll say more elk in that particular habitat versus deer.
So then what leads you to really a lot of what we're going to discuss is that how did you get involved in this agenda, or yourself personally? Because I know we're going to talk about the Wisconsin Wolf Hunt. We're going to talk about Rocky Mountain Wolf Project. But what was the thing that made you aware, I think, of this agenda that wolves, were being hunted in some parts illegally, and also just being hunted for sport just because, and what you as a hunter yourself were you on the side of not hunting wolves, and why did you make that conscious decision to do that? Or how did that process shake out for you?
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that too, not only like how did you get into this topic, or like what drew you to this topic, but what is a pro wolf hunter? Like, what's the mindset of a pro wolf, of someone who hunts and is also pro wolf? Like, how does that happen?
Right.
Because again, sometimes it can seem counterproductive.
Okay.
So how does that happen?
I'll get it. I'll do my story first, and I'll answer your last question there, Stephen. So a little bit of a long story here, but so Ray told you kind of the upbringing around hunting. My first wife, she ended up going to school when we were married, and basically specialized in carnivore biology. So at that time, I was kind of at-home teacher, so I was teaching myself more and more about that role. I've kind of, even before I met my first wife, my first love of any animal in the planet is lynx, and I threw myself out to, at that time, Colorado Division of Wildlife, now Parks and Wildlife, and got myself to be a volunteer for the lynx reintroduction in Colorado. So I got to be around high-end carnivore biologists. I ended up doing a lot of habitat survey and just learning from them, and then actually got to see them and be part of that reintroduction. And that was just like, wow, just a beautiful animal. Obviously, that carnivore is a whole different quote unquote animal than a wolf is, but it is a carnivore. I went through the public meetings. It's kind of the same things as the fight that people have with any carnivore, but lynx is pretty safe. So kind of had an idea, started training myself, and that kind of thing. And then ultimately, so my first degree is in basically a drafting, computer aided drafting. Ended up going back to school and get a natural resources management degree. And so early in that, there was a flyer out. This was up at Colorado State University in Fort Collins that said, you want to know about wolves and what they are, come see, come to this lecture hall, and we're going to have a live wolf from a sanctuary show up. So, I was like, okay, sounds cool. So I go there, and it's that big freshman lecture hall, 300-400 seats in it, and the kind of continuous tables and that type of thing. And so I get in roughly in the middle of it, and I'm just there. It's pretty full. I would say not quite as full house, but pretty crowded. So a sanctuary from Colorado brings up their ambassador wolf that had traveled to the Senate, Capitol, U.S. Capitol, trying to change the images and they're talking about wolves and stuff like that. And they're like, okay, the other part of what we're going to do today is, so the story I'm telling is going to be pretty obvious why I fell into love the wolves. So he goes, this is Rami. He's our ambassador wolf. He's about 110 pounds. So he's been around a ton of people. He goes, so what we're going to do is we're going to unclip him, and he's going to roam the place. Your interaction is going to be this. He's not going to attack you. He's not going to do anything. He's going to, you're going to get that feeling of what a wolf brings to, what a wolf is. It's like, sweet. So you could just, they bring the wolf out, and, there was kind of this, I'll say, background noise, like this, the entire audience just went, it was dead quiet in there. And, it's just that power that a wolf brings. I'll say anywhere, but especially to a room. So he goes, okay, if you don't want to be here, leave now, So he unclips Rami. Rami just looks around on the stage, kind of goes up. If I'm kind of from the stage, goes up. So he's off to my right. He comes upstairs, and you look at him, he just effortlessly hopped up on the table. So there he is. He's coming down my row, click-clacking, click, that kind of cocky, self-confident wolf thing. So he comes, I mean, from me to my computer, here's this wolf come by. He comes by and he comes by and he looks, just like looks at me, and it was like, holy, like that look. So then he walks about, I don't know, say 3 or 4 feet past me, turns around, comes around, pops his snout right against my nose. So and I'm like, deep breath, I'm immediately start sweating and, at the same time getting chills. And then he starts licking. Of course, when they were saying that, they say if they start licking, that's how they shake your hand, kind of brave face. So, show your teeth. So I licked my teeth, I let him lick my teeth, and he pulled back and he looked at, looked just that, I know it's kind of cliche, but everybody goes, once a wolf sees past you and sees your soul, like I felt it then. And then he came and like kind of leaned or pressed his bottom of his chin on my shoulder, just like there. And I was just like, time stopped. I was like,
wow.
Blank.
Yeah.
Then he pulled back. He did that one little look, and he walked to the end of that row, went down and walked himself back on the stage. He didn't go anywhere else. And the leader from that sanctuary goes, "Sir, do you work with wolves?" Like, in every place that I've seen, I've never seen him just go to one person. And I said, "Nope, never seen one." Just start learning about it. And he's like, "Well, you may want to consider that you become an advocate." I'm like, "Yeah, I think I am." So really from that point, I'll say the quote unquote typical fear, what a wolf is and the Red Riding Hoods and all that just like went away. It's like, there is something special about at least that wolf at that time for me. And then that's when I started hopping on and reading and finding things and reading. So where I just don't fall into, like, I'll say if an environmental group says, wolves are this and this and this, they're great and blah, blah, blah. I looked at that side. I looked at hunting group sides. I don't get involved in too many organizations because they have to fully, I'll have to fully be, even if they're 90% in and they do good things, there's, I look at the full picture, like money and stuff like that. So I looked at everything and just started learning more and more about them and, going to sanctuaries, start broadening my horizon. I dove into the wolf subject, which, we're that guy, where it can take you on that. So that's where I started, that's my why, is that particular moment. So for me, how do I become a pro wolf hunter? Learning more and more about, I'll say, ecology. And, at this time I started hunting private or public lands, getting away from roads. So I'd be miles and miles into, I'll say, either wilderness or just away from the general public. And it felt in Colorado just very, very boring. There's not much, diversity. Like, it would be very little birds. You could see the plant life. I'd start noticing that kind of thing. And then part of our kind of going back to our family vacations, we went to Yellowstone quite a bit. Did the whole road thing for years and years. Even as, when I was out on my own, I only did the road thing. And then one year I decided to get out of my car and I walked, and I was just blown away. Like the birds and the moles and the hawks, and this was all pre-wolf reintroduction. So I would say late 80s, early 90s, and it was just like it's a different forest up here, even versus Colorado. So yeah, the Yellowstone reintroduction occurs. I go up there and just see and keep watching things, looking at Division of Fish and Game, all of those 3 states. And, because I was a little concerned that they, how they were going to impact, hunting. was I ever against it? No, absolutely not. I mean, they're a part of the system, but then as I'll say fast forward today, yes, numbers went down, but if you look at successful hunts in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, I mean, 500 to 700 wolves in each state, if not more, and hunting success is continuing to go up. It's just like I don't. From a purely a hunter's point of view, I don't see any reason why any hunter would have any problem with having wolves here, because wolves move elk 24/7, 365. I get to go hunting 7 days a week. I get, I go farther in than a lot of people do. It, could be 3 to 5 miles from a road. There's a lot of wilderness back there that animals, they're not stupid. All of a sudden, Labor Day hits and nobody's in the mountains, and 6 weeks later, all of a sudden there's this rush of humans. Like, they can pretty much tie that together. So I'll say I'll kind of end. That's how I became a pro wolf hunter.
So let me ask you this though. So now, you're in this community, obviously, and you seem to have a fairly researched and educated grasp, which, not everyone can maybe get this information. And obviously having the experience that you had in that lecture hall is, again, we say this at Wolf Connection all the time. I wouldn't believe some of the things if I don't see them with my own eyes or hear them from someone firsthand. So to me, that is a truly divine intervention type occurrence that happened for you. Right. I mean, for that to happen is incredible. So when you're on this pro wolf side and you see the ecology, what are some of the things that do you hunt with a group? Do you hunt mostly by yourself? Are you part of a group of individuals that understands the ecology and why it's good for the elk and the deer and all of the ungulates to keep moving and to have a stronger population, even if it's smaller? How do those conversations go with people that are maybe in your inner circle that are not necessarily, like you said, in the, say, the defender of wildlife groups or the fringe hunting that just wants everything they want to hunt everything?
Right. So it varies over the years. There's a couple of years I'll totally go by myself, and that can be interesting. I'll start with there. I had an interaction, I'll say roughly 10 years ago. I just was bringing out the last hind leg of an elk and, to my truck. So I've spent, 10 plus hours walking probably 12 miles, packing out an elk by myself. So I got to my truck. I have an older truck and I had shell open and stuff and elk in there. And these guys came up and we're just talking and they're like, hey, where'd you hunt and all this? And I said, well, I have no problem giving it away because 95% of the people are not going to go there if you can't get an ATV in there. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm up this creek, and they're like, wow, you packed that out, and I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we just, we don't have the physical ability to do this and stuff like that. And they go, so we're up on the side of a hill, kind of looking down at the valley, and they go, I get so mad because either the elk are all the way up where you are, or they're all the way down there on the flatlands, on private land where we can't spend $6,000 to get a, private, to hunt on somebody's land. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of bad. And I was tired and obviously it's always hanging in my back of my mind with wolves. So I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to go. So I close my tailgate, cab down, and I have a wolf sticker on there, wolves belong. And one guy goes, oh, you're one of those. I was just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And I said, I'm really curious. What do you mean by that? And he's like, well, they just, decimate an elk herd or whatever. And I'm like, no, they don't. I said, I'm going to make it really simple. I said, so you just told me you can't can't go where I go. You can't afford down there. So you're in this fringe area and you want to hunt elk. Yeah. And I said, yeah. So what do you think could move animals to give you a better chance to get one of those? And they just kind of sat there for a while. And I said, well, what is some animal that was here, 24/7 moving these animals all the time? I said, do you think you'll have a better chance of getting a harvest? And they're like, well, possibly. And I'm like, well, that's all I'd ask you to consider. And I just left it at that. So I always try to throw it out there. I don't try not to get on my soapbox too much. And I run into that individually out in the woods, with people, and it's hard. It's hard at times because it triggers a lot of disdain and divide. You're in the backwoods and everybody's all armed up and everything. So, so when I go with a group, the number one thing for me, because I've had friends come to me and say, hey, I'd like to go hunting with you and learn about it. And I'm like, great. And I said, number one thing is ethics. Like, you need to make sure you're shot, and this and that. And I think I could broadly say everybody I've taught, knew where I stood with carnivores. And I said, if you are firmly against this and feel, that you're just, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And, if you have a small game license and we see a coyote and you shoot it, like, you and I are done. This random, I'll say, hatred or lack of a moral code or just shooting anything doesn't work with me. And and then the one guy I go hunting with now, he knew, he hunts and he bow hunts, and and he knows where he stands. And and I said, hey, I can tell you and I can talk to you hours about this, but I encourage you to look at both sides. I said, look at both sides. You're a smart, intelligent man. Come up with your own, decision. I'll tell you my why I won't do this, why I want them here, why I spent hours, advocating for them and speaking to them about them. But, he's like, yeah, I don't see any reason I would. And he goes, I'm just going to get overall a healthier animal. He goes, I'm out here to get a really good quality, meat. I'm not going to take the one that's broken down and all this. He goes, that's just not in my human nature. And I'm like, there you go.
Yeah.
So,
easy.
I push it a little bit, yes, but, I know it's already a controversial issue, and I want them to make their own decision with a little bit of shove by me. So,
yeah, and the pro wolf hunters that is this topic, because it sounds like what you're saying, in a nutshell, is that because you're aware of the larger ecological benefits of having large carnivores on a landscape, you're willing to maybe risk potentially just a more difficult hunt, or like you're saying, maybe a more plentiful hunt, maybe more abundance. I don't know, but you're willing to risk sort of those changes, maybe even a few less elk, for the overall ecological benefits of having a balanced ecosystem where in the long run animals will be healthier. Is that generally the basis for support amongst pro wolf hunters, or are there other topics being sort of tossed around?
I would definitely agree with that, we're, and I'll say we is a loose statement. We are, looking at the better ecological, and like my one friend said, just more healthier herd. The other thing too is moving them out of the deep, dark, like almost inhuman or unreachable spots. Like, if something's moving as a human, I'm going to have in my mind, I'll say in my common sense mind, I don't have any scientific proof, that it will happen, but, I'm going to have a better chance of even at least seeing something. I mean,
it's really kind of a brilliant outlook, actually. I don't know if I've ever heard it. It's kind of brilliant, and it makes total sense.
I mean, it just, the idea of it moving, and, so then that's where I go to, like, a state level, like hunter success is going up. okay, well, they have all these, it just they seem to line up. It may be just a happenstance, but that's just my guess, is that you're just going to have a better chance. They're going to be moving.
And did you ever get a chance to talk about this type of stuff with your father? Like, would he agree with you, do you think, like his generation at least?
I think you would. I can't say 100%, but I just have a gut feeling, because I just remember one time, and this was like within my first 2 years, even before I could actually hunt, I would just walk with him. We ended up seeing a badger, and I just remember just watching it, and my dad's like, "Look at that thing! Like, that thing's, is hardcore," and like, I don't know. I think he said something like, "I'd almost rather run into a bear than a badger," and we just watched it for hours, and so I would have a guess that he would. I never really got a chance to talk to him about any of this. So
yeah, like your openness. I was just curious if you're open. The way you look at it might have been, your father might have been instrumental in developing your mindset that way.
I would say he did have an instrumental part of it. I mean, that's where all of this kind of started from. Is just just watching him be really. I mean, he was generally that kind of quiet, silent type already, but just the different energy you feel when he did shoot a deer, and we'd walk up to it. I mean, you could just. I wouldn't say the tension. You could feel. Feel the aliveness at the moment.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like you have such a, like Steven said, really an expanded view of what hunting is and what it should be, and the impacts of it. So are you going out and speaking to, individuals or groups on your own? Are you part of any organization that does this? Because it seems like you have a unique perspective that you're able to share. And I don't know if any of any of the individuals that you hunt with or any of the groups that you hunt with, is this something that you actively take to different places, whether it's college campuses, whether it's town halls, things like that? Or are you involved in that way also, so that you can share this perspective?
I'll say a little bit more. I'll say more on the individual things, like, if we're out camping or, having a backyard barbecue, that all stuff will come up. I did tell that wolf story at the campus at an event in Boulder. They do this thing called Ignite. And what I'll say is that's a Cliff Notes version of a TED Talk. So you have like a 5-minute thing. So I kind of told that story and told the basic, Red Riding Hood, kind of the false images of wolves at Boulder Theater, which is about 850 people. But really it's more individual, family, guys I hang out with, either hunters or non-hunters. I've been involved in various, I'll say, pro-wolf groups, and, come in as a hunter. That's not exactly easy, because there's the image of a hunter, and I get it. I'm sometimes embarrassed to be called a hunter because of what things going on, but also trying to change that. But as far as a bigger, like, I'll say, tour or going into classrooms and stuff, no, and I haven't pursued it yet. I to be honest, I didn't really think about it in the, kind of at a university level or that kind of thing, of thinking about that. But that's, I'll write that down.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing right around you is equally important. You know what I mean? Just influencing the people that are right around you, who you have access to. Any type of conversation like this is going to just spread that ecological level wisdom that we kind of need.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. And, I would like to get in Colorado to the West Slope. I mean, it would be interesting. The meetings are starting to happen here. So, and John, to go back to your question, I am part of the Rocky Mountain Wolf program, or what's called Colorado Wolf Coalition now. I would like to do that. I mean, there's a lot of things coming from, and yes, I do have a value, because you got both sides already. You either like them or you don't. I mean, that's a lot of it. It's again, I call the fringe, which I think is hunters, because they have influence with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I just find it pretty hard. I know a lot of people are pro wolf that are hunters, but won't say a damn thing about it. So
that makes sense.
For getting ostracized or anything like that. So
yeah, that's such a tough position to be in. I mean, you play it so well, and this thing. Stephen and I got introduced to this phrase called the radical middle.
Yeah,
a bunch of podcasts ago, and it's such a great, but it's a great phrase to use because there is people such as yourself and others that are pro wolf, but not to the extreme on the one end, and then the anti wolf on this side. So there is a place in the middle where people can meet and make these things work. So then how did you get involved in the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project and the Colorado Coalition? Was that, did someone come knocking on your door and heard about your experience? Did you offer yourself up for this? I mean, how does that feel for you to be a part of? It's sort of a two-part question. How did you feel about when the proposal came down, it was passed, and you knew that there were going to be wolves eventually reintroduced to the Western Slope? And B, then how did you get involved with the coalition as well?
Sure. So to get involved with it, I'll say that's a two-edged story. I'm going to take a guess of what year that was. Maybe 2010 or so. There was a wolf symposium at Colorado State. So like I'll say the who's who of wolves. Rolf and Doug Smith and Mike Phillips and the kind of old, those people were all up there talking. And, this again was my learning thing. I'm like, okay, so they had everybody there. I ended up talking to Doug Smith a little bit because he brought up, he was a hunter and stuff. And I'm like, hey, how, as a wolf, Stephen, like you asked me, as a wolf, or as not a wolf hunter, as an elk hunter, how do you become pro wolf and be able to stay? And so he and I talked for, I'll say 5 minutes. And he's like, hey, have you heard about the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project? And I said, no. And he's like, well, I'll introduce you to Mike Phillips. So I talked to Mike and he's like, yeah, he goes, if you want to volunteer, at that time. And I said, okay. So then going to how I really got involved is after that talk at Boulder Theater, a woman came up to me that is still an integral part of the wolf program. She came up to me and she's like, have you heard about, this group? And I said, well, yeah, I am. I'm, kind of on an email list. Like she goes, no, you need to be in the group because we need to have your voice. So she introduced and she and I had coffee, and then we had a conference call with Mike Phillips. And then I'll say I got handed into the group. So, and I've been part of the group since, let's see, what was that? 2016 or 17. So even before it made it to the ballot. So getting ready for all that, I was out. I did some ballot collecting and talks and stuff like that with various groups, and then still involved in the next phase after it passed. And now, helping CPW write their plan for it and expectations, that kind of thing. So.
And what are the main focuses or the main activities of the Rocky Mountain Wolf Foundation?
So the Wolf Project is just education right now. Before we went to vote, it was both, but now it's all education, videos, what wolves are, what they're not, what they do, that kind of thing. The Colorado Wolf Coalition is a group that kind of the same group of people that now transition to, science-based. So there's a lot of science. So like Delia, that you guys spoke to, she's in the group, and of course Mike's on it, and I'll say 20 other people with various backgrounds. So, and they're, that group is there to, guide and help and, get a solid, good wolf management plan before we reintroduce.
What is that like for you? Like if you were to go back 20 years and then fast forward to here, did you ever believe that this was possible? And two, would 20 years ago you be like, this is where you would be sitting at this moment, under knowing that in your home state that you're going to have a reintroduction project of wolves and you would be at the center of it, really? You'd be a part of it in some way.
20 years ago, I started getting the bug for it because that's right at 22 years ago is when I was doing the links. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is cool. And then I really honestly, even, up till election day, I really didn't know. I mean, I wanted them to, but I also know what they bring, the consequences of what they bring. I'm super excited about it. I guess I'm proud of myself that I'm willing to, I'll say, take the chance to reach out. I mean, I reached out of a random phone call to the volunteer line to Colorado Parks and Wildlife 25 years ago, because there wasn't really any email at that point, and got super involved in it now. And then, going to meetings and, taking a huge chance to talk in front of 850 people. And then, kind of, I'll say how things work is you put yourself out there and people show up. And so, I'm excited about it. And I'll say the group is really trying to, do it right. I mean, we're learning a lot from Yellowstone and the, northern states of what we'll say should be done versus shouldn't be done. I wish I could be more involved in it than I really am. I'm a little bit, I'll say I'm not as active as I really want to be just because of certain life circumstances for myself, but I still am involved. Obviously I'm still excited for it because I reach out to you guys. Like I could talk about this stuff for hours. So
yeah, we could do. Maybe we'll do another segment of this later, further on into the reintroduction as well. But
right.
So being that you grew up this way in this practice of harvesting wild game and eating wild game as a family, you have this group of friends that you hunt with. You're in it. You're in the community from that space. What do you think is the best way to communicate with other hunters? What approach will be the least ostracizing? Cultivate the most openness to this message, like that we can coexist with wolves. What is the best conversational approach with this particular group of folks?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge.
I really don't. The best I could do.
it is a challenge.
When I'm out hunting, like that, those two guys that were at the back of my truck is in that way of like, there's proof that you can be a pro wolf and still hunt. Getting the word out that that I'll say hunters will start just taking a voice. I mean, it took me obviously years to become a voice. I mean, I've been a, lover of carnivores for all my life, but to actually say it, and it's getting past the peer political organization group things, and trying to think for yourself. I mean, that's what I try, I try to tell people. I'm like, obviously I'm going to be pro wolf, but I also want you to look at both sides and develop your own opinion about it. But look at, if you're looking at either side, pro or not, or anti, the old saying, especially at least what I found, is like anything, follow the money. Who paid for that research?
Right.
That's almost the very first thing I look for when I do research is I go find who funded it. Then I'll, if it's a university, that's great. If it's ABC company, no, it changes. I mean, unfortunately that's the way it runs, especially here in the States. And, I just ask people to, do their own research, and I'm happy to tell my story and how I came up with it. But yeah, I guess to really answer your question, Stephen, is I think being out in the field, And, and talking to, I know outfitters, I know a couple of outfitters that are, God, my goodness, there's no way, they can't even go to the landowner and say something, or they won't. And I'm like, your landowner may be, and it could change. And, just like the ranching community, I know there's ranchers out there that will not shoot a coyote.
Yeah.
I mean, if they lose a calf to a coyote, the mom cow goes to market. They're like, there's no way a calf should have got ate by a coyote. So that's a 180 way of thinking.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the coyote's fault, it's the cow's fault. And, so they're out there, but they, and I can understand the peer pressure. I mean, if you're not liked in the small town Western community, boy, it's tough to live.
Yeah, true.
So.
Yeah. I mean, we've been lucky enough to be speaking with, and more so down the line, a lot of these coexistence projects that are working with ranchers that are able to, and Stephen loves this every time we talk about it, is really teaching the cattle generationally how to act more like bison, how to act more like a natural herd, so that if there is an infringement upon their herd, it's not cows or cattle are spread out throughout this,
they herd up
wherever they're grazing, so that they actually they herd themselves up together, they huddle the calves, and so that they're protected. And, if at that point an animal gets taken, and again, we are pro, the ranching community are the people out west, especially in these states, in the Montanas and the Idahos and the Wyomings. I mean, these are the people that are still keeping the land wild as it is right now.
Gatekeepers.
We've had gatekeepers, they really are. And we've had multiple individuals on this podcast that have said that. And we believe that. So I think there are ways, and it's been successful. We had Suzanne Ashestone on with talking about sheep grazing, and Karen Vardaman, who's talking about cattle ranching. So it's possible. And I just don't know
the approach.
Again, the approach, like you said, Brett, to really dive into the ones that are maybe so staunchly against, or just on that fence, what's going to tell them there are other ways to do it, and we can all coexist, and you can keep the land as wild as it is at this moment, in time.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, ranchers have, valuable land, and especially here in Colorado, Colorado is no longer a secret. And, they are the land keepers, and there are the corridors and all that. And at the same time, we also need, there's changes. I mean, they lose crops to, state wildlife still pays hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for crop damage from elk. So, I mean, there's some advantages looking at, getting animals off of their land too. So
it's true.
I agree. I mean, I'm not fully against all ranchers. Everybody has to live with it, and I'll say this, because I know this is an ongoing thing, especially in Colorado with it passing, is, this east or front range versus western divide. A lot of ranchers, have a lot of meat, and they sell it to high-end restaurants and Whole Foods. Well, those things are here in the front range. So, we all need each other.
It's true.
And we all want, I shouldn't say we all want, again, it's that, in part of my, it's a symbiotic relationship. We all kind of need to learn on each other and kind of get a little bit better at looking at a bigger value. And I think it just really comes down to, what's that author's name? Richard Louv, nature deficit disorder. We're kind of losing our, love for nature. And like nobody just, if you have an understanding, just a broad understanding, I don't expect you to become an ecologist, but, nature is big.
Yeah. But the unfortunate part is, like, everyone really can live together. Wolves can be on the landscape, ranchers can still be successful, and hunters can still be successful. But it just seems that, like, the basic biology just doesn't really work. It doesn't really penetrate, because there's there's other things. And I think a lot of it is honestly politics, is really driving a lot of the misconceptions and the, I don't know, sort of willful ignorance of the reality.
Yeah, I agree. I think in general, people, I'll say that, ranching, I'll say general ranching community understands it. I had my misconceptions about them when I, after I got my second degree. I worked on a ranch, and I had this conception that they're, all they care about is, pounds on the hoof. And
yeah,
I'll say I worked at a ranch, and this guy was a botanist that absolutely blew me away. Like, he was pro fire. He was the same one that, talked about the coyotes. And I was like, wait a second, you're not supposed to be like that. And he kind of laughed, and then I was like, and he's like, yeah, there's more of us out here than you think. But, again, he goes, there's others that scream aloud or connected that really kind of, so, it kind of, that one particular rancher really opened my mind about, I'll say, the potential of that. And that they're out there, because he goes, yeah, if I don't know what I'm feeding my cattle, then, it's like you don't know what you're putting in your own mouth. And I'm like, it just all started clicking. I was like, so I have my prejudices too, but I would like to see, like you said, this radical middle start speaking up.
What do you think it's going to take for that to happen? What do you think? Because what was it? You had these unique circumstances come up for you. So what, if you had any advice or what would you say would be the first step if somebody is in your position that's listening to this and they hear your story, they know what you do and where you stand now? What do you think that first step is for somebody if they feel the way that you do to make that known and be able to come forward and speak honestly from what they actually believe?
Again, I go back to it, find out where you're at, get all sides of the story, find your answer, start speaking to it, make sure you understand it, and also have an open mind that, we all have, blind spots and that type of thing. I mean, in a perfect world, what I would love to do is a handful of hunters, a handful of ranchers in 2 weeks. 1 week, everybody goes to wolf sanctuary.
We could do that.
Interacts with the wolf, walk with him. You have talks and people talking about it. The other week, that whole group works on the ranch. Understanding what ranch life is. With a ranch, it has to deal with carnivores. I mean, somewhere that, they have to deal with lions and bears, black and brown bears and wolves and all that. And I would be interested in that. I really want to see what it would, quote unquote, take to be, and be successful. So, kind of getting into that, what is that? Walking in somebody else's shoes. And then, and then maybe it would change or ease, or I'll say these two fringes, the ranchers, hunters would maybe be open to things more of like,
Sounds like something we might be able to facilitate, John. I don't know.
Yeah.
If we can find a sanctuary somewhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would love to do that. Obviously, getting people that time to do it, even if it's a day on both sides, just to have an understanding. I don't think people I'll say the antis really understand what just purely wolves are. And if you take just one, how it can affect that family, or if you take the whole pack. Well, if you take a whole pack and they're already on your ranch, you have good habitat. Another one's going to come by.
Right.
Like that, have that understanding. A hunter, or anybody else that doesn't know what it takes to run cattle and being up at night during calving season and, all this kind of things, and just have a better understanding and maybe try to open people's mind a little bit by experience. I'm hard-headed as any other guy out there. I mean, I probably would have gotten to be a wolf advocate, but I wouldn't gotten as fast if I didn't have a 110-pound wolf right in my face. I mean, it's just honest. Until I actually see it or interact with something, it's going to be hard to change some people's minds. So,
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, so I did want to touch on this too, because it's sort of got lost in the shuffle of this awesome conversation that we're having. But I see on your Twitter that you post things from huntersforwolves.org, and I know you're not part of that. So what's the general consensus? Because I saw, I don't know if the billboard is real, but there was a couple of things that they post. So what's the idea of huntersforwolves.org? I kind of went on it, and it was talking a lot about the Wisconsin wolf hunt, and again, a lot of the things that you're echoing about the ecological impact, and the hunt was over in 3 days. It was supposed to last a week. We've touched on this multiple times with multiple guests. So what's the aim for huntersforwolves.org? If even in a general sense, if people look it up, and they come across it as sort of a hunter pro-wolf place to go.
How because I can only say it from my point of view. When I heard about it,
right.
I was like, thank you. Like, I think it may be a place that hunters or past hunters or current hunters that are like, I don't agree with, this mass slaughter of any animal, even if it's deer. I mean, this whole mass slaughter, and it's all encapsulated under the hunter, tag. And, I'm not a hunter that way. And I applaud the group or the person, or I don't know. I've reached out to them. I'm really curious about kind of who they are. And I would love to talk to them about, expanding to the West. But I guess how I looked at it is like, this is great. Maybe a place for people who are leery or scared, or maybe just want to learn more. And it's not coming from a, necessarily a pro hunting group or an environmental group or a governmental agency. It's coming from quote unquote peers. So like, maybe there's that, there's a handful of people that are, I'll say like me, that just, you can be a hunter and not like hate everything except for what you're hunting. And I think that's where I got on it and why I was happy to see it. I would love to learn more about who they are and have a conversation with them. I've reached out to them, but have not heard back from them yet.
Maybe we can get someone from there on too.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah,
so
it'd be good. No, it would be. So what's your thought going forward then, Brett, about, I guess, just in Colorado, for instance, and how do you see, obviously they're shooting for 2023 for this reintroduction to happen. I know that I think Mike Phillips was saying they were a little behind the 8 ball, but now things are really starting to roll in terms of their plan and their management of what they're doing. And do you think, in your own personal perspective, that Colorado maybe can be one of these places where the radical mill could feasibly find itself, because there is time before this reintroduction happens? So people have a chance to, maybe they see you out in the woods and you can have these discussions, or they talk to Mike Phillips, or they talk to the Sarah Michaels, or Sarah Michaels in Idaho. Yeah. But not a surprise. Yeah, it's not a surprise. So it's coming. Do you think that'll give this a little bit more of a chance for people to let it breathe and sort of settle in and really look at all of the facts and understand why this is an important conservational aspect of the West?
In my heart, I hope so. Yes, in my hope, I hope so. I think Parks and Wildlife is trying to do things. They're have held a couple public meetings about, they've had like Mike Phillips and Yemis and that, kind of talking about what, lessons learned. And then I think it's this week they're having a coexistence public meeting. So, they're bringing up the issues and stuff like that. I'm hoping they're doing it, try to educate people and not doing it like, we just have to, because they now got forced to do this. I'm going to say I'm a little leery on that. I hope it gets there. And I'll give I don't know if you guys heard this, a little bit of recent news. So just this week, they Parks and Wildlife have just confirmed the first litter in Colorado.
Yes, I saw that. So, I did.
So, that starts the ball rolling of why do we need to reintroduce? And, that basic biology, it's like, okay, we have a pack here now. You look, the whole just, biology 101, but, it's really hard. I'll just say, I hope we can do it.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it, is having people who are passionate about spreading the word instead of just doing it because it's work. But isn't that really, that's really the case in every scenario. You need someone who's got a little bit behind it, but there's so much good science out there and so many great case studies demonstrating, everything from the blatant obvious to nuance advantages to having this great equalizer that are wolves out on the landscape, or really just large predators in general. And the benefits can run the gamut, from benefits to elk on ranch land to coyote numbers, competition with other large predators, moving animals around, selecting for compromised animals, including, maybe not being the be-all end-all answer, but a great tool in the arsenal against CWD.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of things too. And again, I don't know if any hunters are listening. Product wasting disease got started here. What do wolves take out? What are you not going to shoot? Less animals moving. I just read literally this morning that somebody's doing their PhD on how wolves reduce deer or animal accidents with cars, that kind of thing too. So
yes, I saw that article too.
Those are fringe. Those expand to everybody who drives in the mountains, whether you're a vacationer or whatever. So, there's a lot of things that could be pluses. Yeah. There can be some minuses. Absolutely. Am I going to say that they're not going to take any, livestock? No, I'm not.
They totally
that's
are.
pretty damn obvious, but
totally.
There's ways around it. And as long as it's, I'll say quote unquote done right, I think, I think Colorado has an abundance of information from years and years of scientists and who people are living with them now, that I think we can, and being in the middle of their North American habitat, I think we can be a really, really, really good link, not only in genetic diversity, but just how a large state with people and a very active outdoor population can live with a keystone predator.
Yeah, and the CWD thing's a pretty big deal too. There's obviously the counter argument, which is that it takes so long to show up. But the folks who are studying this particular thing, we had a few people on who study diseases in animals, who did a private land study of wolves, and how the percentage of animals they were killing that were compromised in a way that maybe humans could not detect. And the reality is they just pick it up earlier. They pick it all up sooner. I can't remember, John. There was something about the droppings of an ungulate affected with CWD, where essentially the sooner that animal expires, the better.
Yeah,
they read physicality a little bit better than us. and so it might have an effect. It's not going to solve it. No one's going to lie about that. You know what I mean? But it's anything we can do at this point. It's spreading all over the darn place.
And, at least the last I've heard, it's unknown if CWD affected meat can affect humans.
Zoonotic disease. That's one of the fun words we learned.
You're trying to use Ellen Brandel's word. I know. She's
always like, I need to throw that in there somewhere. Right. Zoonotic's one of them.
Yeah, sticky note up here.
Zoonotic was great. Yeah, I know. That was that episode blew our mind because Ellen was, my God, she is incredibly intelligent and knowledgeable about that stuff, and that was a whole.
Yeah, I found that very fascinating episode too. So.
Yeah. She is fantastic. I mean, she is a huge person in her field. So that was great.
Right.
Everything that we've discussed here is that if you use all the parts, you can make the whole, right? You make the cattle and the herds, or the cattle and the livestock act like herds. You understand that there is this disease that is tackling these ungulates, and it is spreading across the country with really little. I mean, it's not really being tackled to the point where you could eradicate this disease. And if you have this keystone species that's able to help in certain ways, that the balance, some sort of balance, can be restored all the way through. And I'm not saying wolves are not the key for everything, but a lot of the issues that we talk about are able to be at least helped along by this predator and by this pack of animals that is able to really restore a balance in a way that it helps migration patterns and it helps all these different things. I think the pieces are there. And I think, Brett, with you and the stories that you shared, your knowledge and what you're bringing to the table, it's just another piece and another part of this whole that could really, it seems like all this stuff is converging on Colorado now, and that all of these issues could really be formulated into something that, and I agree with you. If Colorado goes off the way that we all hope it will, that could really be the management plan for everything moving forward. And I think if people see that and the successes that they see in certain parts of the West, it could really elevate this to a whole new way for an ecosystem and for really trophatic cascades here in North America that could actually help.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And that's what I want to see, and that's what I'm going to advocate to see is, just trying to put things in place as best as we can to make that happen and make it done. There's enough evidence to do it right. It's just be able to get done right that's the key issue. And I hope we have, I'll say we citizens or whoever's involved that stay on that and make that happen, because it can happen.
Technically, we've been fairly successful at wolf reintroductions. I mean, it worked in a lot of states in places that you never thought it would work. The hardest part is we haven't figured out how to create acceptance or to change anybody's mind. It's hard to change people's minds, really. And there's got to be someone who's good at that can lead this charge, but it just seems like nobody can change anybody's mind. And then we have 50 people on this podcast who all are just blowing my mind in every single episode.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, well, if we just clone all these people a couple dozen times, we'd be good.
Yeah, it just, and I agree. Yeah, I don't know, I do my best to, help help educate people. And I, again, not to get on, try to get on soapboxes or whatever in my backcountry, but just to, and it's part of, I have I'll say a controversial job too. So I try to think of different ways of thinking about it instead of just what's in the newspaper. Hey, you want to be able to get it, you want to see animals moving, right? Yeah. Well, what moves that? This kind of very simple, very, non-scientific. I don't want to,
practical
talking down to me and practical and kind of in your, like I go, I told like those two guys at the back of my truck, I'm like, I really don't want to carry, 70 pounds 4 times, at 10,000 feet of elevation. Like, I'm not a young chap anymore. And, if I could get it, 2 miles closer, that's, 8 miles because I have to pack something out. I'm like, I'm all about it too. I'm all about, I love sitting in the woods in the morning. I mean, there's nothing almost nothing better, pre-dawn. I mean, the chance of what you can see
binoculars
is unreal. And
sit pad,
binoculars or just sitting in a tree set. I mean, I've had, foxes come by and coyotes, and it like, a bird, an owl nesting above me, or, that I didn't know was there. And it's fabulous.
I mean, I assume over where you're at, the wolves won't make it there for a bit, or you think they'll come from this western slope?
I would say they're going to be western slope, bigger areas. They may make it into Rocky Mountain National Park just because there's a large elk herd there. Now, that's fairly close to the Front Range. I would say it's be sporadic, but we have big, huge wilderness areas. They'll get over there. I mean, I'm sure there'll be, strays and ones that want to come over. I mean, there's elk out here on the plains where they shouldn't be. Kind of, I'll say even before population, there's an elk herd in Boulder that, it's smart. It's in this beautiful spot that maybe gets a little bit of lion pressure, and that's about it. But, I don't think they'll make it out here, at least in, I'll say, Denver, Boulder area. A little bit farther south, there's a range that kind of goes across I-25, which cuts Colorado half between north or east and west. They may get out there, but we have plenty. The biggest elk herds in the Flat Tops Wilderness, which is this big expanse of land, and be my guess that would there and where they're already denning is going to be probably the first 2 spots they'll go.
Unbelievable. So exciting. But I would love to hear an update on that, on whether those elk herds started moving differently. Yeah,
I would. I agree with you, Stephen. I would love to, if somebody's listening to this who's a scientist or will be a scientist or come out of college, well, there's your thesis. Yeah, there's your thesis, him or her, and let me know about it.
Yeah, I know. That is. No, there's so much. God, there's so much more. That's why the next year and a half is going to be truly exciting to see how this all pans out. And, we're going to be at the forefront of it. We're going to definitely try and get as many people on for this as possible. And Brett, we'll definitely have you back on. And I mean, there's so much more to talk about once this gets closer. I think that'll be really, really fascinating.
If you're ever down in Durango, let me know. We'll do, some kind of live video interview, because we're shooting a larger film that we started in Yellowstone.
Okay.
And it'd be awesome to get you in there.
Yeah, I love Durango.
Yeah, so if you're ever down here.
Okay, I'll reach out. Thank you.
That's Steven's home spot now for now while he's waiting.
It's a good spot.
So Brett, my last question for you is, when you hear the word wolf, what comes to your mind?
I hear the kind of 3 things I hear. They are who they are all the time. I wish I could be that way. They're authentic leaders, and they're just steward. It just seems like they're a steward of wherever they live.
Yeah, that's awesome. Brett, this has been such an, first of all, just a very eye-opening conversation. I thank you again for contacting me, for us to get you on here, because this is really an important conversation that needed to happen. And we will have this conversation again with you. If there's anyone else that that is similar to your situation, they want to get on and talk about their experiences, we are more than happy to have them on. whoever they
Yeah,
are.
or worth mentioning, if you know any folks who hold a complete opposing view to yours, we'd love to have them on too.
Okay.
So yeah, if you know anyone who'd be willing to talk about it, is passionate enough about their perspective to talk about it, even if it's, totally polar opposite to yours, that's
right.
We'd be honored.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll reach out to some people and see if they're interested. And yeah, thank you to both you, John and Stephen. I really appreciate the time today. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you. Tons of fun.
No, absolutely. It was great. How's to everybody out there, and Stephen and I will be with you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Looking to support Wolf Connection or sponsor one of the wolves in our pack? Just go to wolfconnection.org, click on the donate tab, and find out more information.